Hey, it's Michael Haddon with a Process Center, and today I'd like to talk about something which is very near and dear to my heart, which is good password management. At the end of the day, all security comes down to how good is your password management, and not just your password management, but the password management of everyone within your company. The idea of security is if you just have one weak link in a chain, the whole thing can come apart and break. And generally speaking, this is the main way the chain will break in your company. And I'm sure you have probably experienced this type of breach before because it is so common, which at the end of the day is password mismanagement. So let's have a conversation about how we can mitigate this and resolve it. And I'm going to present the case to you that you need good password management. So, these are the three fundamental reasons why this is important. 1. Weak passwords cause the majority of data breaches. 2. Secure passwords protect sensitive information and maintain privacy. 3. Effective password security practices are essential for ensuring the integrity of your digital assets. It's literally as simple as that. I can't make this any more simple than this. Now, it's not just about having secure passwords, it's about having uniquely secure passwords. Having a secure password is great and all until that secure password gets compromised, shared, and leaked through one of these many data dumps that happens frequently whenever a service you used gets compromised. Reusing passwords across multiple accounts and multiple systems fundamentally increases your vulnerability to cyber attacks. And this is fundamentally why it's so easy for attackers to gain access to another system that you have access to once they've already received your credentials from another dump, another leak, whatever it is. Your whole system is just wide open for everyone to compromise. So, let's look at some statistics. 60% of data breaches are due to weak passwords. 30% of people share passwords to other people in their organization, which creates a complete chaos when it comes to auditability. You don't know who has access to what in your system because the person you thought had access to it has now shared that credential with someone else. And so that completely breaks the whole role based access control model because you have no idea who has access to which things in your system. 1 in 8 people use the same password for every single account they sign up for. 53% of IT professionals use email to share passwords. Email is not a secure method of communication. It's not a bad method of communication, but it's not a secure method of communication. And so you shouldn't use email as the method to transfer passwords to other people. 3 in 5 adults use birthdays or names in their passwords. 37% of employees use their employer's name in a work-related password. So, when we start using the same maths of the amount of people who have these very predictable password sequences, you can start to just guess people's passwords in an organization. It doesn't become very difficult. Now, you may think, oh, well, it's difficult to guess. You'll still have to go through a lot of information. But let's say you already have a set of information on a particular user in an organization. You can populate a script with that data, birthdays, bosses' names, their family names. You can get all this information from LinkedIn and Facebook, right? And now you can just start generating likely passwords that that person would probably have. And you have a good chance of, by just creating this basic script, to come up with a password that someone in that company, because remember, 37%, so this doesn't necessarily have to be you're gaining access to Steve's computer. You can be just focusing for any one person in an organization of 200, 300 people, just one person, to just get inside of that one person system. And then once you're inside somewhere, start propagating out into other machines and other parts of the system. Now, 80% is how much using a secure password manager will reduce the breach risk of someone entering your system. Now, the philosophy that a lot of companies adopt to get around this is to have mandatory password changes. So every month, all of the employees must enter new passwords. If a company is more relaxed, then maybe once a quarter, but the point still stands. Mandatory password changes suck. The reason why they suck is as soon as a employee has to start doing this mandatory password change, they just start doing something repetitive and easy for them to remember. This has been the case for me as well. Sometimes I enter an organization, I start with like secure password, which is like 20 characters long, and then they're like, you need to keep changing this all the time. So you start doing 1, 2, 3 at the end. And so it can become very predictable what that number at the end of someone's password is based on how many times you are forced to cycle your password and how many months or, segments of time that that person has been at the organization. It doesn't make it very hard to predict, right? And because of this, people also just use less secure passwords. So I'm not saying mandatory password changes aren't a good thing, but enforcing them on a frequent basis literally encourages people in your organization to do weak passwords. It's the fundamental truth. Now, I mentioned this before, but password sharing is horrible. It fundamentally breaks your role-based access control system. You don't know who has access to what. You can't remember who has even requested access in the past. It's just sometimes it is in an email that gets forwarded around. Sometimes it's in a public Slack or Teams channel. Sometimes it may be just loose in documentation, unencrypted, just chaotic. It's like a little piece of information or a post-it note that you've just left flying around in the office. Unless you have a secure way of really understanding who has gained access to a password, how it's been shared, you're completely in a chaotic situation. Also, something really important to consider when it comes to sharing passwords is the fact that if you're sharing a password, a credential, a login between multiple people, and then someone does something malicious, you have absolutely no recourse in understanding who it was, because anyone at that moment could have been logging in with that credential. So, good password hygiene. Now, I'm sure you guys know all about this stuff. It's the standard stuff, right? Have a mix of letters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, special characters. Maybe use passphrases to make it easier to remember, like coffee, sunset, rainbow. And importantly, to create a unique password for each account to prevent a domino effect if one is compromised. And, there'll be standard advice for weak passwords not to use passwords like password123 or 123456, even though they're the most used passwords, and to refrain from sharing passwords with others to maintain confidentiality. These are all good pieces of advice. So, ignore it. Because you should not fundamentally know what your password is. If you know what your password is, something's not right here. That means there's a fundamental flaw in your processes of how passwords are created. Each password you use should be randomly generated securely for each system you use, and you should not even fundamentally know what that password is. The moment that you think you know, you've got a problem. And obviously, utilize multi-factor authentication with services and systems you use. Now, you might be thinking, if I'm going to have all of these randomly generated passwords, I'm going to need a place to store them. And every browser comes with a password manager built into it. Now, you don't want to use the inbuilt password managers in your browser for this functionality because, first of all, they often do not have certain functionality that is required to even know that you are secure. So, for example, they don't often offer secure password strength assessments, they lack secure password sharing options, and they often do not provide password expiration reminders. And on top of that, there's some major security risks of using these password managers. The first one being that you have a single point of failure. If someone just gains access to your machine or to the browser, it's so easy for an attacker to gain access to your browser cache, your profile. That's so easy for someone to get into. That's like the basic level of access someone has to your computer. And then all of that information is wide open. On top of that, these passwords are often not stored encrypted on the drive. And additionally, they will be often synced to other devices you own automatically, meaning that if any one of your devices get compromised, you will automatically have all your passwords leaked. Isn't that wonderful? Now, fundamentally, there is one other point as to why these password managers, in my opinion, aren't sufficient, is often they don't have the integrations with services like Have I Been Pwned or other leak database search services to tell you if you have vulnerable passwords, which is a major concern of them. So, disable them. I strongly believe that one thing everyone should do is to go to your browser settings and literally disable your password manager. Don't even leave it running because you don't even want it to collect your passwords. If you leave it running and consciously think, well, I just won't, accept it when it asks me, do I want to save this password? If you just think, okay, well, I'm going to, just keep it like that, then eventually you're going to make a mistake. Maybe that one password here, that one password there, you'll eventually mistakenly save to your browser. It's better just to go into your browser settings, disable it fundamentally. No longer there. So, what are the benefits of a real password manager? Well, they securely encrypt your passwords in one central location. You can have complex and unique passwords for each account. They can even alert you, by the way, if you have the same password used in multiple services. You can simplify the login process with autofill. Now, I highly recommend you not to turn in the auto login functionality. This should always be a conscious decision just to make sure you're logging into the website you intend, because there can be a vulnerability where someone has a bogus website, for example, and then the automatic login process kicks in. And so you're basically leaking your credentials to this phishing website. So autofill can be useful, but use it very consciously. You have to be intentional of your use of that button. Never use auto login. Because you're not always typing in your password all the time, you can be protected against some types of key logging attacks. It allows you to also store your secure MFA tokens within the password manager itself. Now, I don't recommend this for extremely secure things like, banks or cloud providers or whatever, because it will be good to keep that multi-factor authentication system on your phone, more secure down there. However, for websites you care a bit less about, it can encourage you to still have multi-factor authentication enabled on that service, but you're just storing it inside of your password manager. So that is still good, just to encourage people to always use multi-factor authentication whenever possible. And on top of that, the main point is they have the real-time monitoring of your passwords with system alerts and notifications when a leak is detected or there's any vulnerability with any of the passwords in your account. Now, one of the main criticisms of password managers is how are they secure, right? You're trusting someone to keep all of your passwords secure, which is basically a passport to your entire internet life, right? How can you trust them to keep your stuff secure? Now, fundamentally, one of the core beliefs I have is that even if the password manager isn't secure, it's still a good practice to have all of these rigid processes in place for your passwords, then not using a password manager and just repeating the same password everywhere. Sometimes people think, oh, I'm being smart because I actually have like 6 passwords and I actually do a variation between them for different services. That doesn't work. Trust me. As soon as the attacker starts to see a pattern there, all they can do is just feed that information into a computer program and start generating all of these random variations that you thought of. If you've been targeted by someone, they will go out their way to do these custom scripts. And if you're, an important person within a company, you will be targeted because, especially from state actors, sometimes for some of your companies, you're in a situation where you're a core industry within a country. And so you will be targeted by state actors sometimes for various different reasons. And when that happens, they will break in if you have this cool password trick. So, how do password managers actually stay secure? First of all, they keep all of your stuff securely encrypted for you. And they have zero knowledge on your system. Usually the way that they do this is they base the decryption key on your password, and they do not fundamentally know your password due to hashing. And so because of this, they are unable to decrypt your vault. This is usually the standard practice that password managers adopt. And on top of this, they have regular security audits. Now, sometimes these password managers get broken into, and that is going to happen a lot because they're highly targetable companies. However, even though their database or their files get leaked, there's a good chance that the attackers will not be able to decrypt that information in a timely fashion. So, what does this mean? If it takes the attackers, let's say several years, because we don't know where quantum computing is, we don't know what these supercomputers can do, but generally speaking, for these highly cryptographical datasets, it takes a huge amount of processing to compute through that data. So if we find out that a password manager has been compromised, like recently we had LastPass, a major password manager, if we find out something has been compromised, we can then start using the password manager to help us start cycling all of our passwords. If necessary, we can always use this as a time to migrate to another password manager, cycle everything, good practice. You should be cycling your passwords anyway. So by me saying you'll have to cycle your passwords, you shouldn't be thinking, oh, I don't want to do that. It's good practice to do anyway, right? So it's a good exercise to keep everything fresh and secure. So fundamentally, I understand there is a concern, but I still fundamentally believe, regardless of the concern, it's far more secure to do this than the alternative. Also, additionally, you can go down the path of self-hosting your password manager, and there is some major ones to do that. However, obviously, by doing that, you take on the responsibility of that task. And additionally, unless you keep updating your password manager, you will run into a situation where you may be behind and open yourself up to a vulnerability that you didn't expect because the cloud version would have kept itself updated for you. Thank you very much for watching. I've tried to keep this video light on an actual password manager to use. There is many out there. If you just start looking, you will see hundreds probably that are available. Anyway, I hope this has been an interesting video, and I hope you've learned some good fundamentals for cybersecurity. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I hope you guys have a lovely day. Cheers.